Hi, I'm Jess, part-time hobbit, and I'm here to talk to you about Tolkien. Boromir is the kind of character that divides people into two camps, those that absolutely love him and those that absolutely hate him. But actually, it's usually a bit of both. I've been watching the Lord of the Rings movies for as long as I can remember, and Boromir was always a character that made me very uncomfortable. I kind of hated him for a long time, but somewhere along the line that resentment turned into pity. But as I've dug deeper into both the movies and Tolkien's original text, I've come to see him as one of the most nuanced and deeply fascinating characters within the story. So today we're going to be doing a deep dive into both book Boromir and movie Boromir to compare and contrast these characters and see what they can teach us about fear, hope, and really good storytelling. So let's begin where it all began, the books. Boromir is first introduced in the Council of Elrond. He's traveled an incredible distance all alone because he and his brother Faramir have been receiving these prophetic dreams. These dreams told them, "Seek for the sword that was broken. In Imladris it dwells. There shall be counsels taken stronger than Morgul spells. There shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand, for Isildur's bane shall waken, and the halfling forth shall stand." And the information from this dream is all that he has when he leaves Gondor. At this point, Boromir is just going to Rivendell for advice, without any prior knowledge of the ring. In fact, the ring is probably the farthest thing from his mind. At this point, the ring is basically a footnote from a fairy tale from 2.5 millennia ago. This would be kind of like if you got a text from an unknown number that told you to go to Rome and meet up with the Pope for advice. And when you arrived, the Pope informed you that they had just found the Holy Grail and it was gonna end the world. And Boromir hasn't exactly had a lot of free time to be sitting around and contemplating ancient history. Things in Gondor have not been going well as of late. It is the kingdom being most directly and critically impacted by the growing power of Mordor. The armies of evil are literally at their doorstep, and more so than any other kingdom in Middle-earth, Gondor has been in direct daily conflict with the enemy. Not only that, but Boromir is specifically supposed to be this warrior prince leading his entire kingdom in all matters of military conflict. Everyone calls him the best man in Gondor and expects him to be their last hope against the powers of Mordor. This is an awful position to be in because Gondor has no hope against Mordor. Boromir has been at the very forefront of a losing battle for his entire life, facing off against Nazgul, watching men die around him, all while being treated as the only hope of the free world. This unique pressure that's being placed on Boromir is immediately present in the text as he recounts the battles that he's fought in, as well as the harrowing journey that he took to get to Rivendell. He is desperate, assuming that the doom spoken of in his prophetic dream is the doom of his home, Minas Tirith. And then he sees the ring that once belonged to the king of Boromir's kingdom and is the only weapon strong enough to directly compete with Sauron. It's the missing piece of the puzzle, his last hope at victory, and the second he sets eyes on it, it is whisked out of his hands. He's told that the power of the ring isn't really what he wants, and promptly informed that he will not be allowed to use it in the defense of his homeland. And surprisingly, Boromir takes this with a lot of grace, even if he does harbor some private resentment. And even more surprising, he handles the revelation of Aragorn's true identity just as well. There's a moment of tension, a hint of doubt in his eyes, but he pretty readily accepts Aragorn as the true king of Gondor. But the thing is that Boromir and his family have sat at the foot of this throne for centuries with power just within their grasp. They've been kings in all but name, and honestly, I'd expect a little more angst when someone comes to sweep this out of your hands. However, this ready acceptance of both the true purpose of the ring and the return of the king of Gondor helps illuminate Boromir's primary and sole motivation. He wants what's best for Gondor. And if that means the ring can't help, then so be it. If that means another man is gonna be ruling his kingdom, so be it, as long as these things can ensure Gondor's survival. So with this in mind, we can dispel a pretty common misconception that Boromir's fatal flaw is like greed or pride. He's not a selfish man. In fact, I would argue that he's almost a little bit too selfless. Rather, we find his fatal flaw within his motivation. His single-minded love and dedication to the kingdom of Gondor has left him in a state of despair. Upon Boromir's introduction, we see a character who has come face to face with insurmountable odds and been left to feel hopeless. So maybe that's why he so readily accepts Aragorn as king. He is a beacon of light within Boromir's incredibly dark world, and he'll gladly accept Aragorn as king if it means that Gondor will survive. So he agrees to join this quest. Unfortunately, we don't get to see a whole lot of Boromir along the course of the journey. I would argue that the main points of interest are the ways in which he's ignored. He argues that they shouldn't try and cross the Misty Mountains and is steamrolled. Because of this, the hobbits nearly die of hypothermia and Gandalf does die. He argues that Lothlorien is dangerous and is steamrolled. They lose a full month of travel time in the forest and are put way off track. He argues that they should stop in Minas Tirith to regroup before they strike out for Mordor and is steamrolled. The quest is not going well, so this idea of hope that Boromir has latched his entire being and motivation onto is proved to be just that. An idea. He's lost once again into the despair that he simmered in for all of his life. That is, until Boromir is faced with the ring. The ring that could grant him ultimate power. The power to fix things on his own, as he's always had to do. And they've given this weapon, the ultimate weapon, to a hobbit. Practically a child with no grasp of what he's gotten himself into and no power of his own to wield. And with this sickeningly bright ray of false hope illuminating the darkness that is swallowing Boromir whole, he breaks. He reasons, he begs, he pleads with Frodo, trying to get him to understand the gravity of the situation. But when coaxing with words is ineffective, Boromir does what he must to get the ring that he needs. It's only when Frodo vanishes and temptation is fully out of reach that Boromir realizes what he's done, that he was fooled. "What have I said?" he cried. "What have I done? Come back! A madness took me, but it is past. Come back." But it's too late. This one fatal mistake has driven Frodo away for good and removed Boromir's last shot at agency. But even then, he doesn't turn himself over to evil. He fights desperately to save Merry and Pippin from torment, and even though he falls, he has one last word with Aragorn, where he tells him that the hobbits are alive, allowing for their eventual rescue. And finally, Boromir hands his lifelong burden over to Aragorn, saying, "Go to Minas Tirith and save my people. I have failed." But in his last breath, Aragorn corrects him, saying, "You have conquered. Few have gained such a victory. Be at peace. Minas Tirith shall not fall." And Boromir smiles and dies. This final moment is the vital conclusion to his entire arc. In his last moments of life, Aragorn gives Boromir what he has always needed, a promise of hope. Not the fearsome false hope of a ring of power, but a simple promise from one man to another that he wouldn't let Boromir's life work go to waste. It's the perfect wrap-up to Boromir's arc. The fundamentally good man who's been lost to despair and hopelessness, redeemed by hope at the end. Now, Peter Jackson had the unenviable task of taking this entire character arc and fitting it into half of a movie. This was not going to be an easy feat, and as is the case with all adaptations, changes had to be made. Now, for the record, I am mostly going to be speaking about the extended editions of The Lord of the Rings in this discussion. Unfortunately, a lot of his screen time was cut for the theatrical release, but I think if we want to fully get a grasp on the way that Peter Jackson wrote this character, we have to look at all existing content. If you haven't seen the extended editions, I highly recommend that you at least go hop on YouTube and watch Boromir Boromir's extended scenes before you continue on with this video, because they are fantastic scenes. From his very first moment on screen, Boromir is on an entirely different track. Rather than choosing to go to Rivendell on the prompting of a vague dream, he is told directly by Denethor that he needs to go to this council because there are rumors that the Ring of Power has been found. So immediately, this decentralizes his motivation. It's no longer purely just about the protection of country and state. It's more personal now, woven into the highly complex net of his toxic family relationships. Boromir isn't just going there to get advice on saving Gondor, he's going because it's another responsibility unduly placed on him by his kingdom and by his father. The original character is thrown for yet another loop by the major changes made to the character of Aragorn. I cover his adaptation pretty comprehensively in the first video in this series, which I'll link in the cards and in the description, but I'll give you a quick rundown here. My perspective is that Tolkien originally wrote Aragorn to subvert traditional concepts of masculinity, especially medieval concepts of masculinity. This gave us a character that was a firm and confident leader without being controlling. He was super strong and never swayed from the path to kingship or doubted his own legitimacy for the role. However, Peter Jackson had different masculine tropes that he was trying to subvert. Namely, the uber-confident, super macho hero types from 80s and 90s blockbusters. Thus, the Aragorn that he gave us was plagued by constant doubts and has to go through a full character arc to discover himself worthy of being the king. Whether or not you think that was the right choice for them to make for that character, that's entirely another issue, but the fact is that it had a big impact on how Boromir was portrayed. So when book Aragorn and book Boromir meet, there's no question for either of them over who's gonna be the king. However, in the movies, Boromir is faced with a character that takes one single look at the throne that Boromir has dedicated his entire life to guarding over, and Aragorn just kind of goes like, no thanks, I'm good. And immediately we are faced by this, I think, well-earned flash of resentment where Boromir says,
Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king.
This is a moment that some people find a lot of problems with, especially when you compound it with the other scene that he has with Aragorn in the corridor with the Shards of Narsil. The Shards of Narsil are an incredibly old and incredibly important artifact. For a quick analogy, that's like walking into the Louvre, pulling down the Mona Lisa to check her out, and then just tossing her on the floor when you're done. It's super, super disrespectful, and this kind of childish disregard that Boromir shows for his own heritage just isn't present in the books. However, I think these moments were well fed and well earned by the complex inner life that we already see blooming in this character. Once again, let's talk about what Boromir has been going through. Just as in the books, Gondor has been the epicenter for conflict with Mordor, and Boromir has been at the forefront of this fight. He's the golden boy, supposed to save them all, who is deeply burdened by the knowledge that he can't save them all. However, when he's forced to go to Rivendell to retrieve this ring and save the day, he finds someone who not only should technically be the one saving the day, but that this guy just doesn't feel like it. So of course there's gotta be a part of Boromir that resents Aragorn for taking away the throne that Boromir and his family have wasted their whole lives keeping safe. But deeper than that, I think there is a pain, because Boromir has been burdened with the weight of the world, and he's finally face to face with the one person who could take this burden off his shoulders, and that person won't do that. He's frustrated by his kingdom, by his family, by his heritage, which seems to have only set him up for failure. He lashes out at Aragorn, at the remnants of his past, at everything, because he's been told his whole life that he needs to figure out how to save the world, and he can't. Everyone in the council just looks at him with distrust, because he's human, and apparently that means he's weak. And then they take off on this quest. They hand the ring off to a hobbit, who's, practically a child, and Boromir is faced to follow Aragorn, who still is apparently refusing the role of leadership. The Fellowship outright ignores Boromir's advice again and again, and I think he could be forgiven for being a little bit bitter and cold, but the thing is that outwardly, he's not bitter or cold. Despite the pain and turmoil he must be feeling, Boromir is generally kind. He's the one who always thinks of the hobbits first, guarding them, training them, and trying to shelter them from the frightening world that they've been introduced to. Because of their poor choices, the hobbits are nearly killed, Gandalf is lost, and it seems as if this quest might not be the ticket to saving the world after all. This comes to a head in Lothlorien, where Galadriel speaks to the Fellowship, both out loud and in the privacy of their minds. She announces that hope remains while company is true, but how is Boromir supposed to take that? Doesn't really look like there's very much hope, no matter how true he is to his company. Later that night, he speaks to Aragorn, breaking down when he recalls what Galadriel had said to him.
She said to me, "Even now there is hope left. But I cannot see it."
And I think that's the moment where he finally acknowledges that. He trusts Aragorn with this admission, pouring out his heart, the truth of his father's failing rule, the fading faith of the people of Gondor, and how all of this has been placed onto Boromir's shoulders. And then finally, Boromir admits that if he wants to see Gondor restored in glory, it can't just be him. He trusts Aragorn to share these burdens and promises to take him home to the glory that he's owed. But when faced by Boromir rending his heart open, Aragorn is silent. He hasn't come around yet to accepting the mantle of king, and this scene ends in silent non-reciprocation. Boromir's semblance of hope is hanging on by the merest thread, and on the shores of the Anduin, we see Aragorn knock that hope out of the sky entirely. Boromir begs Aragorn to let them pass through Minas Tirith to regroup before they go to Mordor. He's offering to go at this quest together as leaders, and Aragorn turns him down.
There is no strength in Gondor that can avail us.
This is not only blatantly untrue, but also rude. Boromir is quick to point this out, noting that Aragorn had no problems trusting the elves with their safety and their secrets.
Yes, there is weakness, there is frailty, but there is courage also, and honor to be found in men. But you will not see that.
And the thing is that right here, Boromir is right. He calls Aragorn afraid of what he is, of who he is, and again, he's right. Aragorn needs to step up to the plate for any of this to work out, and yet he lets Boromir down. Boromir's behavior here is not any kind of like the ring's corruption or greed or selfishness. Boromir has opened up to Aragorn, has trusted him, has let himself finally hope in him, and Aragorn is letting him down. So then, when Boromir finds Frodo in the forest, we watch the brave son of Gondor unravel. This isn't a fit of madness, it is a full collapse of this man's mind. He's been under a world of stress, but lost in a pit of despair, and he sees this child out in the forest with the one thing that Boromir has left to hope for, and he wants it. He offers Frodo a reasonable out. He tells him of the undue burden that Frodo has been laid with, offers to help him with it, and yet Frodo reacts in fear. Like Boromir is some kind of common thief. Boromir, who has given up everything to do what is right, to do what is good, to save his kingdom, and Frodo doesn't trust him. So what is Boromir to do but to take his fate into his own two hands and take the ring? Then Frodo vanishes, and that last slim illusion of hope is gone. And when Boromir thinks about it, that illusion of hope was always just an illusion. It was never there. He realizes his own utter powerlessness against the cruelty of fate, and he weeps. Boromir was never evil, never corrupt, never cruel. He was human. And yet he holds on to this humanity even when it seems that he has failed in every possible way. He defends Merry and Pippin with his life, beyond his life, until there is absolutely none of him left. And then Aragorn holds him, and Boromir is at last able to admit to his weakness, to his failure, to his utter despair. And it's only when faced by this man, who has tried to do everything right and utterly failed, that Aragorn is able to see that he can do what this man could not. Aragorn takes up this burden and promises to finish the job, and in that moment, we see the relief on Boromir's face. Boromir dies with a smile, safe in the knowledge that his efforts were not in vain. Boromir teaches Aragorn and the rest of the Fellowship what it's like to be human, and it's because of his actions that the rest of the trilogy was able to take place. What Peter Jackson did with Boromir's character was to make explicit what Tolkien had left in the undertones. I don't think that anything that Peter Jackson did with Boromir's character specifically is truly removed from canon, but I do think it grounded it a bit. Boromir had Aragorn and his contentious relationship with his father to deal with, and what we got was a much messier character arc. In my opinion, it was more emotional and more relatable, and really does well to encompass the kind of things that we all go through. I see movie Boromir as a kind of unfolding of the book character. We can see it through the pages of the book, but the movie lays it out loud and clear. The horrifying, painful, and often hard to understand ordeal of being human. I hesitate to call Boromir's character in the movies, like, better than the books. He's an incredibly complicated and nuanced character, and I think in a way, you're not ever gonna fully understand him on a first read or watch through. I don't think you're fully gonna understand him in any medium until you've had some time to really soak the character in. This is certainly true for my own life. Coming around to the character of Boromir was a slow and painful process for me, because accepting that I was like Boromir was accepting that I was human. That a lot of the times I'll try really hard to do the things that I want to do and the things that I think I need to do, and I'll fail anyway. That I'll trust people and they'll let me down. That sometimes I just make mistakes. But what Boromir was able to teach me is that those things are just symptoms of being human. That failure is not a moral wrong. That trying hard to be good is good enough. That sometimes being human is the best and the only thing that we can do. This series of videos has a soft spot in my heart because out of all of the videos that I make, these are the ones where you guys usually like disagree with me majorly. And I think that's a lot of fun. I think that civil disagreement and discussion is the best possible way to get a better understanding of these fantastic stories. So let me know in the comments if you prefer book Boromir or movie Boromir, and let's have a chat. And while you're down there, make sure you hit the like button too. Last week, we hit 2,000 subscribers, which is just amazing. This channel is growing very, very steadily, and that's honestly the best thing I could possibly ask for. We are building a fantastic community here, and I'm just really, really grateful to each and every one of you that has subscribed and joins me every week for these videos. That being said, if you're not subscribed, please do that and hit the notification bell so that you're notified every single time I post a video. Next week's video is coming out a little bit early on the 14th because it is a Valentine's Day special. But after that, we will be back to our regularly scheduled Thursday afternoon content. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you all have a very happy, hobbity day.